Welcome to the Decision Lab podcast, the sanctuary for wellness professionals like therapists, coaches, creators, and more who are looking to over-deliver to their clients.
We uncover the truth behind cutting-edge wellness products by going straight to the founder.
We use our backgrounds in neuroscience, chemical engineering, and marketing to ask the hard questions in order to eliminate bias, misinformation, and fancy marketing language.
Allowing you to make better wellness decisions and recommendations for yourself and your clients.
So if you're a leader in the health and wellness space, welcome. This podcast was designed for you.
Join us every week for interviews that will change how you think about wellness. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Decision Lab podcast. And today I'm really excited to talk to Annie Stancic. So Annie has 2 decades of experience building consumer brands, from leading high growth startups to working with private equity backed and publicly owned brands. She's been involved with some of the most well-known names in the world, such as Vaseline, Axe Men's Grooming, Kettle One, American Express, Del Monte, Klondike Ice Cream, and even Sweet Tarts Candy. Can't wait to dive into all of this. Annie made a pivotal career shift when she faced her own skin issues in her 30s, which made her co-found her own skincare brand. So after 3 years of formulation development with Dr. Martin Smith, they launched Untoxicated in the summer of 2023. Annie holds a BBA from the University of Michigan and an MBA from the Wharton School of Business. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you. Welcome, Annie.
Thank you. Super excited to be here, Chloe, and I'm very excited to share more about my journey, Untoxicated's journey, and all that good stuff.
Okay, well, just to get started, I'm super curious. If I was your friend in middle school, would I have been able to predict that you'd be here today?
Man, that's a great question. When I think back to middle school, I think at the time, and I might be aging myself, my friends and I were all like hanging out at the mall, getting our ears pierced at Claire's, shopping at Limited Too. I don't think any of them would have necessarily thought that I'd be answering customer service emails or deliberating or fretting about the alignment of labels on bottles. But I think, joking aside, I think the people that have known me my whole life would say that, my character traits and some of the things that have kind of led me to where I am have been pretty stable. So they're probably not surprised to know where I am today. And some might say I demonstrated my leadership potential early on when I was the youngest captain ever of my youth jump roping team. And I think since then, my trajectory has been consistent. So yeah, and I did kind of ask my parents about that yesterday because I was curious, would you have seen me here? And I think they both said, knowing what they know, they're not surprised. They wouldn't have said it's going to be business, but a role like I'm in now, applying the skills I'm applying, feels very consistent with where they would have seen me today.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, something kind of special we do as a surprise on the podcast is we get a close friend or maybe a coworker to film a little video to say something about you. So we got one from your co-founder, and it's a 30-second video, so I'll just share it on the screen, and let me know if the audio works. But here we go. So this is from Martin. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can.
I'm Dr. Martin Smith. I am the co-founder of Untoxicated Skincare. I am privileged to call Annie my co-founder. She has been instrumental in helping me bring my vision for Untoxicated to life. 3 words that make Annie special is that she is genuine, she's conscientious, and she is tenacious and gets what she wants. One impact she has had on me, she has made me a lot more organized. I'm now a sucker for lists and Excel sheets.
That was very sweet. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah, so that's your co-founder. How did you two get connected?
Yeah, so we got connected. At the time, I was helping to lead a health and wellness company. And at that company, we worked with a lot of top medical doctors, inclusive of MDs at the Cleveland Clinic, which is where Dr. Martin Smith, I'll call him Martin kind of here forward, was practicing at the time. And given my background, having spent quite a bit of time building consumer brands, someone mutually said, you know what, I know this doctor, he's working on something really interesting that I think you'd be really excited about as a brand builder and someone who spent a lot of time in beauty and personal care. Would you be willing to, connect with him? I think it's impressive and you'd find it interesting. And so, we had a couple initial conversations that gave way to me kind of finding on my nights and weekends. I was kind of helping with graphics and diving into things because I just loved it. And, sure enough, that evolved into like a full-fledged kind of partnership relationship and taking his idea and again, kind of really bringing it to life together.
Amazing. And so you mentioned you had your own skin journey in your 30s, and that was a really big wake up call for you. Can you kind of walk me through that and how that led to wanting to get involved with Intoxicated?
Sure. So I've always been someone who's acne prone. And so after years of using harsh treatments like strivectin and oxypad, as well as, just being someone who, my first job in high school and college was at Ulta, I was the person that I love just testing and trying things. So I would be putting everything, I could get my hands on in my hair and my face to try it all out. And I think that eventually kind of caught up with me in my early 30s. And that's actually a very common time, which I now know, didn't at the time, for sensitive skin to manifest in women. And so anytime there's a dramatic shift either within our bodies or in the external environment, I think we're at greatest likelihood for that sensitivity to uptick. So point being, that was really for me the first time I'd experienced some of that skin sensitivity.
And how was that for your confidence? Because I've had skin struggles my whole entire life too, and I find it's been really hard to uncouple my confidence from how I look and feel in my body.
Absolutely. And by the way, you have beautiful skin. But it's true, right? Our skin, when people see us, the first thing they kind of look at is our face, right? It's like your first impression with someone. And so there are so many studies around, the effects that, your skin and your skin health and your skin appearance have on your overall kind of mental state, your confidence and all of that. And I think for me, it definitely impacted my confidence. And the hardest part was just feeling like it was out of my control. I was investing so much time and energy into finding solutions and still struggling. I felt like I just kept slamming into a wall. And fortuitously, again, that kind of ended up leading to Untoxicated, but that was a huge hit to my confidence. And frankly, the two things that kind of helped me near was just knowing there were other people like me out there and that I wasn't the only one who was dealing with my sensitivity issues suddenly at this time of life, and certainly also that couldn't find good solutions. And just, being able to share thinking and ideas with people, right? Or just commiserate, whatever it is. But then also ultimately finding a solution, because there's so much empowerment in that can't be underestimated, to feel like you're able to have agency or take control of your health or your well-being again.
I mean, for somebody listening, maybe there's somebody in the audience that's in their early 30s struggling with skin sensitivity. Do you have any kind of recommendations of this is what I would do if I had to do it all over again?
If I had to do it all over again.
That skincare journey, were there any kind of things you're I would skip this, I would, I would recommend this, don't do anything like that?
No, that's a great question. I think, fortunately, I think we're increasingly existing in a world where information is out there and people are empowered. I think, unfortunately, we're also existing in that world, right, where it's not always good information, it's not always good advice. So what I would say first and foremost is don't expect anybody to hand you the answer or the solution. If it doesn't pass the sniff test, if somebody's saying it's going to cure whatever it is overnight, it's probably not. And that, Chloe, just given what you do for health and wellness, there aren't really very few, I'd argue, if any, silver bullets. And if it doesn't, smell right or seem right, it's probably, not all that's promised. And so, take control, take action, feel empowered to take the steps, knowing that somebody's probably not going to hand you a solution. And when you are seeking information out there, even when you're looking to experts, and I would argue you should really only be taking advice from people who are experts at what they do, whether it's medical doctors or estheticians that specialize in, whatever it is. Again, always use your critical reasoning and critical judgment, and don't be afraid to raise your hand and ask the questions, because if you're not getting clear answers, good answers, or any answers, that's informative in and of itself. So I think it took me a long time to feel like I could start to do that. And I think it would have helped get me to a solution a little bit faster.
That's really impactful. Okay, before we get into all things Intoxicated, I want to ask a few more questions about your background.
Yeah.
So, you've worked with some pretty incredible, massive brands. And I just want to learn about, what were some of your biggest lessons about brand building and how to build a product or a brand that sticks?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say overall, first is if what you're building isn't grounded in a consumer need, it either needs to be unmet or I'd say undermet. So not being met well enough by something else, then nothing else matters, right? I joke that a new car, on the market isn't, it's that's not helpful. It's not great if I just bought another one that's sitting in my garage, right? So I think that matters, and it needs to be an unmet or partially met need that is met authentically. And I know that seems so obvious, but I can't emphasize enough how many times I've been sitting in a room around a table, and we've all just been getting so consumed or trenched in like what we're doing that we forget to pick our head up and really kind of anchor ourselves in that kind of seminal truth, which is the consumer need. So I think that's one. And then two, delivering on this need, even if you're doing so in a differentiated and a better way, is often not sufficient to break through or create success. And there's definitely, I would say, a lot of timing and luck involved, but more than that, resources matter. And those resources can be used, I don't want to say to create luck, but like to help, I think, distort your hand, so to speak. And, coming from the world of $100 million budgets, it's been humbling to figure out how, knowing that we have a better product, and I think we believe, based on what we've learned from consumers, a really compelling and differentiated brand, how do we be smart about the way in which we deploy our resources and show up in the market, just knowing that we're not going to be able to outspend or flood the market with our message in the way that some of these bigger players might.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, were there any other really apparent challenges transitioning from working with these big major brands to being a startup founder?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is I think that a lot of people would assume that because I've been building brands kind of across the growth curve, right? Some like massive brands all the way on down to, building some brands, albeit within the context of a larger organization, that the skills I've developed and deployed in this kind of more corporate or structured context would be plug and play in a startup environment. And they're really not. And I think being a startup founder is so much more about a lot of, I'd say not skills, but abilities. And that's kind of two sides of the coin. But, when I think of a skill, it's I got really good at evaluating creative, right? Based on the ABLE framework and other things, right? Skills to me are more agility and adaptability, creative problem solving, removing obstacles, resilience. These were definitely not things that appeared on any of my performance reviews previously, but that I would say are kind of fundamental to my day-to-day job. And then I'd say the second one that's been a huge surprise as I transitioned was that starting a company is in a lot of ways kind of like raising a living being. And I have a puppy at home right now, so this feels, very real time. But, the thing that you've created by way of your company isn't going to be able to self-sustain or exist on its own. It really can't live apart from your efforts in its infancy. You need to be taking care of it constantly if you want it to survive. There's no business hours, there's no such thing as sick days. And so I think that starts to become a really slippery slope where the degree to which being a founder becomes entangled with your broader lifestyle and your identity is nothing I had experienced before. And frankly, I feel in a lot of ways kind of defies the ability to explain unless you've been in it, much in the way I think parents to any type of, whether it's a houseplant or a pet or a human being would kind of say. And I think I was not at all expecting that to be the case.
Yeah, the founder journey is an all-encompassing journey, and it takes a lot of bravery and a lot of, like your co-founder said, tenacity and hard work, and it really becomes part of you. Are there any kind of daily habits or routines that you have that help your mental health at all? Is there anything that kind of keeps you at the top of your game?
Yeah, I think one Martin mentioned, which is organization and creating structure. So I didn't necessarily, when I think of classic founders, I think of, the big ideas person that's putting things on the moon. And there's definitely so much in the people that aren't constrained by, a lot of the realities of the day to day, that they've got this big picture breakthrough thinking. But I would argue that that's only as valuable as your ability to really bring it back down to earth, so to speak, right? And translate it and make it a reality. And I'd say that's where my kind of skill set sits, is creating that structure, breaking big problems or tasks down into different things. And, I know Martin mentioned the organization. I think that's where we make a really good complement for each other. And I'll have to ask him if I rubbed off on him in a good way or not. But no, I would say like that, I think, is a really big one. And then the other one, just going back to the fact that, to the point you made, and also as a fellow founder, it can be so all consuming that it's been and will probably be a lifetime practice around like creating boundaries. And what do those look like? Especially like when I'm often like right now, I'll work from home, so it's like, it really does physically bleed because I'm not walking into an office every single day.
Yeah, totally. Have you set any boundaries for yourself that you kind of adhere to, like maybe, taking one day off a week or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wouldn't say there's any one kind of like cardinal rule or anything like that, but and this gets into a little bit leadership philosophy, but I'm a really big believer that organizational culture starts at like the very top of an organization, or with like its kind of roots. With that, when Martin and I started working together, we had a bit of a sit down chat to say, what type of organization do we want to ultimately create and build? Like, what do we embody from a value standpoint as a team? Because I think we both believed it was important to start just espousing those values and behaving in that way, so that as we started to hire our first teammates, that was just natural to who we are, right? Like in the interview process, you're coming to a place like there's no, what you're getting. And so with that, we have a little bit of I don't know if it's like a handshake, but an agreement between us, which is, this is something we've given up really stable, quite lucrative jobs to do. So we're endlessly passionate about it, but it is only one part of our lives. And so we really work hard to honor and respect the various other, dimensions of our lives, like family, friends, other hobbies, other things, right? And to really kind of create coverage for each other where and when it feels like that might be necessary or there's a conflict. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's like any one thing in particular. I think it's more of like a way of being, and then checking in with myself to say, how am I feeling? Do I need a break? Or what's on my calendar that I feel like I need to honor? And could there be a conflict between that and whatever else we have going on in the business, say a product launch or whatever it is?
Yes, I feel like that's just so important to have these discussions, whether that's a co-founder or a partner, but to kind of lay out like, these are my needs and these are the expectations and this is how we're going to do things. I think some people skip through those very important conversations early on, and then they almost have to like backpedal with culture.
Totally. And I think, as we were talking about before, like your relationship with Cody and Miles, and, how it was kind of an organic one that grew over time, similar to Martin and I, from the standpoint of, we didn't come in this day one and, think that we were going to be creating a podcast or building a business together. I think having kind of dating before you marry, so to speak, I think helps create a foundation where, and again, everyone's experience is different, but in connecting with some of my friends that have been founders with a partner, I think it creates more stability and comfort to be able to have the difficult conversations or discuss the uncomfortable things in a way that I think can create a more solid foundation.
Do you have any advice that you would give to entrepreneurs who may be just getting started in consumer goods?
Oh man, founders getting started in consumer. I would say, so for starters, I think there's two things that come to mind. And the first one that's jumping to mind is like, get comfortable hearing no. No, I think one is, I'm a big believer that any job will teach us two sets of things. One is skills and abilities from the job itself, but then secondarily is like what the nature of the job teaches us and the environment we're in about kind of like who we are and what it is that we need. And I think with that, being a founder is really a masterclass in both of those things. Mm-hmm. And again, even from someone that came from building brands, I really feel like I've had a masterclass in running a business, much less than, the kind of the capacity around it. Who am I when I don't have any structure? I'm not tying my name to anything. I'm not making any income, right? Like all of these small forms of stability that frankly, I had either taken for granted or underestimated or gone. So I think it really is like a masterclass in both of those things. And I think especially, or even more so within consumer, because the growth horizons tend to be a bit longer, especially if you're a mass brand like we are. The capital needs are higher, the multiples are often lower. And so while the money is out there, Siete just got acquired by Pepsi for $1.2 billion, right? It's totally feasible. I'd argue the thresholds tend to be a bit, or kind of the onus tends to be a little bit higher, especially if you're not like a multi-exit founder or a celebrity. So, going back to what I said initially jokingly, I would say get comfortable hearing no and taking feedback from people, even if you disagree with the overarching message. I have often, almost every time I would say, agreed with some element or found valuable, some element of what has shared in an effort that's made me or us better. And that it's important at the same time to take that feedback, listen to it, but not to let it shake your vision. And I think with that, over time, we've built a really great network of whether it's founders, business partners, investors within consumer, which has been so beneficial in having people that understand your specific challenges and your specific journey. And I would say the same for anyone within, whether you're a SaaS founder, whatever it is, finding people that understand the nuances of what you're solving, I think is really beneficial. And I've found that they've been able to provide us with just like sharper and more like valuable insight, especially in our earliest days.
That is super, super helpful. Okay, let's get into Untoxicated now. I want to hear all things Intoxicated. So there's a ton of skincare brands out there. How are you guys differentiated from what else is on the market?
Great question. Untoxicated is a mass clinical skincare brand. And what I mean by that is it's not at the luxury or even premium price point. Our goal someday, and I'm sure you'll ask me about this, but we'd love to be in like a Target or an Ulta. We're really kind of like $25, $30 or less. So it's at that kind of accessible price point. And then when I say clinical, what I mean is we have medical back. So Martin is a double board certified allergist and immunologist who specializes in skin sensitivity, eczema, and dermatitis. So his expertise is really in that domain. And everything we do is grounded in science, whether it's the ingredients we use, the testing we do before a product comes to life. So that's really what we mean when we say kind of clinical. And within that, our brand is differentiated, I think we believe, both in terms of the product and the brand or proposition. And so what I mean by that from a product standpoint is, is it okay if I share a little bit about like how Untoxicated came to be?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Because I think it's really important kind of understanding our formulas. So Martin, as an allergist and immunologist who really focuses on skin sensitivity, eczema, etc., was practicing at the Cleveland Clinic at the time. And the Cleveland Clinic, for those who might not be familiar, it's really a preeminent medical institution in the United States, if not the world. And it's not a place that people typically just kind of walk into. And so I share that because a lot of the cases he was seeing and treating, this was like the second, third, fourth, fifth doctor in some cases, a patient might have seen. In a lot of cases, he was like the second, third, fourth, or fifth medical doctor that his patient might have seen. And he was seeing a lot of these like difficult to treat and stubborn cases. And what he was noticing was a trend that at first it was frankly like a couple patients a day. And then it grew to like over half of his patient load, where patients would come in and it was super, super common for them to say, I don't get it. I have persistent eczema. I have this rash. I have X, Y, and Z. I'm using the products and I'm following the guidance that my primary care physician or my dermatologist had, told me to do and use, but yet that protocol doesn't seem to be helping. And in a lot of instances, it's actually, I think my skin's getting worse. And so Martin ended up kind of taking a bit of a closer look at a lot of these skincare products that I think many of us as patients and also the medical community would just take for granted as like, those are the best for sensitive skin or inflamed skin. These are the most basic and gentle things that exist. You'll be fine using it. And the reality is at the time, those products were the most basic and gentle. But as time has gone on, skin sensitivity continues to increase in the population. So we're becoming more sensitive to more things. The average woman puts over 500 skincare items in the United States on her body every day, which is just crazy. I know. And I didn't believe it, but I went through and I counted, I kind of did the rough math one day. Like a lot of our hand lotions, for example, will have 25, 30 ingredients in them. So it's really not a far cry if you're washing your hands, washing dishes, doing your lawn, wearing, clothes that have remnants of laundry detergent on them, etc. But sensitivity, as of 2 decades ago, was about 50% of the population. It's now over 70. And if you look at younger generations, it's more like 8 or 8.5 out of 10 people. So that number is only growing. And with that, the solutions that were created for sensitive skin to be, basic cleansers, moisturizers 3-4 decades ago are increasingly insufficient for people. And so as Martin got into the empirical research, he realized that these products that were 3-4 decades old all contained a number of ingredients that have since been scientifically proven to inflame and sensitize skin, and in a lot of instances make eczema and other things worse. And so he ended up with his, organic chemistry background, poring over the empirical research, leaning on his training and saying, can I create a skincare product that eliminates as many of these ingredients as possible to create something that's as non-irritating, non-inflammatory as is, chemical, then also includes the stuff that skin needs to heal. So not just absence of bad, but like adding back in the good, which a lot of these products didn't do either, right? It was just like devoid of negative, not actually having things like ceramides and hyaluronic acid and things you want to repair your skin barrier. And so that's ultimately the journey he was on when I met him with Untoxicated, which is, I kind of say, all of the good without the, the bad, or the things your skin needs without the stuff it doesn't. And like, to make it a little bit scientific, we're the first skincare product that completely eliminates the ingredients that have been known to trigger over 99% of skin inflammation, reactivity, and sensitivity. So there's really nothing like that exists on the market today. And just to like put it in context, the National Eczema Association, which is like absolutely gold standard as it relates to eczema care, or Skin Safe, which is kind of on a similar mission for skin sensitivity out of the Mayo Clinic, for example. Skin Safe, to get 100 out of 100, you need to eliminate 49% of irritants or allergens. We're 50% above that. So we really are kind of redefining the standard for what we believe sensitive skincare should be from a product standpoint. So that was a long answer to a short question in terms of how our product's different. But I think the story, and going back to what I think a brand needs to have first and foremost in order for it to have a shot is, a real pain point based on a real unmet need. That was the need I was feeling when I met Martin, very fortuitously, and that Martin was really on a mission to solve. And so I'll stop. I can talk about how our brand is different as well, but knowing that was a long answer, I don't want to just keep going.
Yeah, no, that was a fantastic answer. And I feel like you gave me so many things to ponder. I didn't realize 500 things that we're putting on our body every single day. And I also think, when you go shopping for skincare, you go to Sephora, or even you try to go to these more natural brands, and you still look at these natural brands and there's still irritants in there. And it's crazy also how little education there is on what is irritating and what is actually good for the skin.
Absolutely. Like there's so many things that so many words you use that I couldn't agree more. So for example, Martin always says this: poison ivy is natural. So just because it's natural, right? It doesn't actually mean that it's better for you. Some of these ingredients that are, lab made or engineered are actually in a lot of instances safer for skin, more consistent in their application or delivery. And in a number of instances, they're actually less harsh on the environment because you're not depleting the same natural resources. So for us, we don't claim to be natural or clean, which frankly is a whole other probably podcast, just given that there's no unified definition of clean. We really, when people ask, say, we're about clinical skincare. And by that, we mean there has to be science backing behind every ingredient we use and everything we do. It has to be proven as safe and effective for even the most delicate and inflamed skin. And if there isn't, a litany of empirical research demonstrating that, then it doesn't deserve to be in our products. And then I think, to your point, just around, there's so much information out there. I'd say there's a lot of misinformation. And I frankly feel like I grew up in a generation like the 90s and 2000s where, if it burned, it was working. That's actually typically a sign it's sensitizing and irritating your skin. So there is a lot that I've had to actually unlearn as part of my journey. And with that, then also navigate what's good and bad information. So, there are some instances where like it used to be much less complicated having all of this at our fingertips, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I had a question about your development. So you guys spent 3 years in product development. And so was it just trying out different formulations, doing some of the research? What was that process like, getting it to market?
Yeah, so we have a pretty intense product development process for being an early stage startup. And I think it's driven by it being like such a passion point for both Martin and I. Like me, my background before marketing was consumer and psychology, and that's really how I ended up in that world. So for me, it's always around, again, like meeting that need, making sure it delivers, and really being a zealot about that. And then from Martin's standpoint, like he's doing the same thing, right? It's all about meeting the needs of his patients, just in a different context. And in his case, he was seeing the really extreme end of those 7 or 8 out of 10 people who have skin sensitivity, like the severe eczema, right? And like these chronic things that were difficult to treat. So the risk of getting it wrong was much higher because, going back to the confidence, standpoint, people would have serious like physical health issues if, these things were not treated or got worse. And then that would, of course, influence their mental health and other things. And so we're really, really keen on making sure we get it right. And so what that looks like or looked like for us and will, of course, ongoing is the first actually obstacle we had was finding a manufacturer that would be willing to even produce our products. So as is very common, especially within personal care, but I can kind of speak to a few different categories. When you're a smaller brand, you're working with a co-manufacturer. So it's a facility you don't own. You're just contracting out your production. And oftentimes they'll say, okay, we'll do, a smaller run for you. But like, here's the like stock menu of options. So you can use this skincare base and add these things. And we essentially could not find any skincare base that was devoid of the irritants and allergens that we were looking to eliminate. So we realized we needed to create something from the ground up. So we got no from, I think, almost a dozen suppliers before we found our current supplier in New Jersey, who's been fantastic. They work with a lot of well-known, quickly growing personal care and beauty companies that you would recognize. So they were so great in saying, yep, we can do it. And then even within that, for example, our ceramides are sourced from like one specific, like it wasn't as straightforward. Then you can just, pick up all these things off the shelves. Even some of the ingredients, if you're starting ground up, were processed or compounded in a way that they had some of those allergens in them. So you can imagine, as a team at the time of like 1/2 between Martin and I, that took an incredible amount of time. And then once we got to formulas that we were excited about, the way it kind of works for us with the 4 products we have today and the ongoing development we're doing for our future pipeline is we'll always do a small friends and family panel to gut test. So oftentimes, it's Martin will put it on his 2 little boys. Like if it doesn't work for his 2 little children with eczema, then like it's not gentle enough for, his patients, his whole family. I am fortunate to have a lot of good friends in beauty and in consumer. So I'm always knowing that they'll give me the real honest truth. So getting them to test it. If it passes, our litmus test, so to speak, we'll then go into it's called like an iHut, so an in-home use test with consumers. So these are not people that know us, but they're people that we're recruiting to represent our audience, to give us feedback, in the context of their day-to-day lives. Do they like the product? How is it performing? So if it then passes that, we do at least 3 different clinical tests, including a repeat insult patch test, which is just to make sure that our product, again, is not in a clinical way, it's not creating any sensitivity or issues for people. We know that the formula itself won't, but what's to say that the way people are living their lives, right? They're not putting something under it or creating other issues. Then we'll do another consumer test, which we've done every time before we launch, which has been really helpful just to get descriptions and testimonials. Again, like more of that feedback as we kind of think about it from how do we want this to live in market? And then I think if every single customer service email, every single piece of feedback we get, we actually keep track of on all of our products. And, if there's a situation where we're seeing a trend or we're noticing something consistently, one of the beautiful parts about being, a smaller brand and a startup is we have the ability to evolve and iterate on it. So that would absolutely be the plan if for some reason we realized, hey, this isn't delivering the way we wanted it to in the market, or, we think there's an opportunity to improve X or Y.
Wow. That's great that you put so much into the product development. Who is, your ideal customer, and what would your dream outcome be for them?
Yeah. So if you can imagine 7 or 8 out of 10 people having sensitive skin, that's, the vast majority of the population, right? And so, our dream, or our kind of our end goal, is to really redefine what it means to be sensitive skincare, not just in terms of a better product, which I know I shared in quite a bit of detail, but also through, I think, a first of its kind of brand that people can really connect with and relate to. I would joke that like this space within the category, if you walk down the aisle of like a Target or a Walmart, is traditionally where skincare went to die. It was just like so functional. Every ethnography we did, people would be like, I use it because my doctor recommended it. It's cheap. It doesn't irritate. Like nobody was like, I love this product. And in fact, we had several people say they put it in like an unlabeled bottle or another brand bottle because they were embarrassed to be using it. So I think for us, our goal is to really redefine the category, not only through raising the standard of care and the expectations people would have around that, but also, feeling like this is something that we can discuss and is normalized, and they can still take pleasure in a beauty and a grooming routine, even if they have sensitivity and inflammation. And in fact, I would argue they could even benefit in some ways even more so if there's some, confidence in other things they're dealing with as a result of it, right? Like, why should you have to choose? And so I think for us, our end goal is like empowering anyone that could benefit from our products whenever and wherever they might need it. And so we'd love to be available in the Ultas, the Targets of the world. Again, we chose a mass price point so that as many people as we could within our P&L afford to have by us could, right? It puts tremendous pressure on margins, but we wanted to make this available to everyone. So we would love to see that, not just with the United States, but globally would totally be our dream. Niren, we can't boil the ocean. Like we can't reach those 8 out of 10 people realistically as a startup brand. So we've really been focused on the kind of moderate to higher sensitivity individuals, because those folks oftentimes are in greatest need because they are having the greatest issue with some of these incumbent brands that I've kind of alluded to today. But also, they're much more kind of educated and informed about their skin because they have issues. I get an email a day, or my team gets an email a day, truly like, where's your glycerin sourced from? Do you have any coconut-derived cleansers? Like, people are really sophisticated, especially when they've got sensitivities, and increasingly so. So for us, not only is transparency important, but we're really kind of leaning into that group, just knowing that I think they're primed for what we're delivering, and there's a lot of potential there. Like one tangible example is pregnant women and new mothers have been a tremendous audience for us. Pregnant women are, oftentimes they're dealing with sensitivity as their hormones and their skin is changing. There's less they can use. There's less they want to use in terms of more consciousness. If any of my friends are indications around toxins and other things, it's not just about you, it's about the baby. And then sensitivity is actually greater and more prominent in children than adults. And so they're also thinking about it through the lens of their children. And so we've had kind of a pretty natural support from that community, given that we're really delivering to kind of multiple needs for those new moms.
Awesome. How are you, marketing your skincare products? Like what's worked the best for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'd say if you and I are reconnecting again in 6 or 12 or 18 months, I can see that answer changing, because we're in our earliest days of starting our marketing support from like a paid standpoint. So the first year we were in market, we really leaned on like organic word of mouth, unpaid seeding. Authenticity is huge for us. One of the greatest things that surprised me in the category, and I could again have a whole podcast on this, is the amount of money that trades hands in this industry was greater than I'd even expected. And I think for us, authenticity was always important for what you and I talked about. There's so much information and misinformation that it's important that we're not just like paying our way in front of people and, spreading BS, but that we really are kind of true and honest and providing like valuable, high quality information. So all that to be said, I think for us, we really wanted to lean into that in our first year to see like, do we have potential? Are people, what do they have to say? Is this resonant? And once we hit our first 6 figures in sales, we then said, you know what? we have potential here. Let's start to lean in and really amplify that messaging. But I'd say within that, our greatest champions, probably outside of my mom, who's got every person she's ever met using it, and she's like calling them and following up to make sure they're reordering, like, and writing reviews, honest to God truth. Love you, Mom.
Oh, hey, Mom.
But no, but like I use it as just like word of mouth, whether it's from people within our own network, or, you know, folks that we've sent the product to that we find online, everything from skinfluencers and medical experts to regular people that are just posting about they've got terrible eczema, and we're just reaching out to say, hey, like, we were created to help people like you. We'd love to send you some product, no strings attached. We just want to help. And we've been able to like generate quite a bit of traction doing that without, you know, paying to get in front of people, so to speak. Now, I would argue it's very challenging to do that and build a mass brand doing exclusively that. So as we move ahead, we're working on what do we layer on top of that by way of paid media and some of these other things that will help amplify our kind of our organic word of mouth through that greater reach and awareness. And by the way, Chloe, why opportunities like this are so great for us, which is it's an authentic place to be able to tell our story. And like that type of thing has been so great in building our community. So thank you.
Of course, yeah, we're so happy to have you here. And I think long form content is really the best because you can really deep dive into the nitty gritty and what's going on behind the scenes. And I think it's really important to get to know the founder of brands because a lot of the decisions will come from that person and who they are. And so if you have great ethics and a philosophy, that's going to like trickle down into the product and how things are being done.
Thank you. No, it's great to hear that. And I have to tell you, like, your insight, we've been also observing from our audience. Like, we put out last year just this like goofy selfie of Martin and I when we were at like a beauty conference in Vegas, and we like turned it into a little holiday card, and it was like our top performing content. Another one of like Martin, it's just like pictures of like him with his kids and just telling his story. Like, our audience has really rallied around that. And I think to your point, there's this need, especially in this world of all of this information, to like, I think it's a different level of authenticity and of understanding a brand. And I think we do believe that out of all of our competitors, there's a lot of paid medical endorsement. We're the only one that has like a true MD founder, and like there's a human behind the brand. And, you know, given the response our audience has had to that and our journeys and our story, we're trying to find the right ways and places to tell that because everything we're doing is grounded in that. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
That's beautiful. Okay, so what's in the future for Untoxicated over the next few years? And like, what's your long-term vision? Where are you going?
Yeah. Okay. So we would love to redefine the mass clinical skincare space. So that massive category. It's about a third of total skincare, outpacing the category, projected to continue to do so. It's like huge with a lot of opportunity. And the way we like to do that is through a superior product, which we discussed. But I can regale you again if you want. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so through this, you know, the first ever we say allergen-free, so free from the ingredients known to trigger over 99% of skin reactivity and sensitivity, and a brand that we really look to have worked to make accessible and relatable, like a real human element behind it that you can look to for transparent, no BS information that can help empower you with the information and the tools you need to take control of your health and achieve that greater skin health. And we would love to be accessible wherever and whenever those 7 or 8 out of 10 people are in need of us. And I'd say, you know, within that, kind of working our way to it, our focus right now is really kind of how do we amplify our growth with the resources we have and kind of continue to grow our online community from a, you know, social and a D2C standpoint. So we can hopefully kind of inflect and hit critical mass to ultimately start to do some retail tests. So start to have conversations with the Targets and the Ultas of the world, because, you know, a lot of people, you know, while an increasing percentage of sales for skincare happen online, I believe the last time I looked at the math, a majority still happen in retail stores, or at least around 50%. And so there's so much opportunity to meet people at that kind of point of purchase, so to speak, that we wouldn't be able to get to online. So that's really kind of a really critical next step or next wave on our journey in that regard.
Well, I'm very excited for you. And, you know, one of our last questions is, what's the future of skincare that you hope to see? Where do you hope to see the skincare industry going?
Yeah, I think it's going in a really exciting way. I think there's so much democratization with the technology. There's access to things, whether it's information or solutions that just weren't available before. And I think within this, it creates opportunity for empowerment. And I know I've used that word a lot, but I think, confidence is kind of a close cousin to empowerment. And, you can feel confident. And I think a lot of that is derived from feeling like you have a sense of agency to, get the information you need and access, the tools, if you've got sensitive skin, the products that you need to be able to really kind of address your needs and achieve the best version of health, whatever that looks like for you. And, back in the day, right? Like there was like one product for oily skin, one product for, there's just so many different iterations of that and layers of that and tech-enabled resources that I think are going to just move us increasingly to a better place for the right, for people who are motivated to find kind of the more tailored or specific solution they need that's ideally dressed to like whatever their specific need or needs are.
Yes, I look forward to that.
Me too.
Okay, to bring it all in, we have a couple rapid fire questions that we like to ask everyone.
Okay.
So the first one is, what is one question that you wish more people would ask you?
Can I give you a contrarian answer?
Sure.
Okay. I actually wish less people would ask me how my startup's going in like familial and social settings. And that might be like totally not the answer you wanted, but it's the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah.
And I know you look so surprised. I think so. Here's what I think it is, and I love your perspective as a founder. It's so hard to draw boundaries as a founder, and the businesses you start, I think, do really become synonymous with your identity in a way that being employed by a company or a corporation is a little bit arm's length removed. And I think I am so fortunate to have so many supportive people around me, like true blessing. And that's been so cool. I don't know if you've experienced this, like all of these people just coming out of the woodworks to say, how can we help? What can we do? Sometimes you just kind of want to go out and have a drink or dinner and like be able to turn it off a little bit. And it feels like it's a little bit harder to do that in the context of a startup. So I've had to work really hard to draw those boundaries. That might be like the most like founder hot take ever. I'd be curious to know if you polled, 100 founders, what they'd say and what their perspective is. But yeah, sometimes it's like, it's all coming from a good place, but it's hard to turn it off.
Oh, I completely resonate with that. So I'm so blown away and impressed by the question, because I've had days where you come home from work and even my mom's just like, how was your day at work? And you're just like, for the love of God, I don't want to talk about.
Yeah, and you don't want to be rude. It's coming from like the best place ever, but you're just like, I just want to turn on trashy TV, not think about anything, right? And again, it's like everybody's like, what you're doing is, there's a lot of courage in what you're doing. And so many people have come to me being like, I have this idea. I'm afraid to leave my job, right? Like you're kind of living the dream for a lot of people. So it's an amazing position to be in. But, like sometimes you just need rest, like mentally.
And set those boundaries. Absolutely. Okay. Next question is, what is a partnership or connection that would really help you outside of them just giving you money?
Yeah. I'd say given where we are in our growth journey and this idea that we have to like outthink and outmaneuver because we can't outspend, and we're all about growing awareness authentically, any type of connection or opportunity where we can create like a real relationship or align with whether it's an influencer, a celebrity, a medical expert, a media property, like the Decision Lab that aligns with what we value as a brand, and we can cross-pollinate on audiences. I think that is invaluable because you're tapping into an audience that is aligned with and a potential consumer for your brand, but also growing your equities. And I think in a lot of times a more authentic way, instead of me just being like, I'm this, I'm that. Like it says a lot more if Chloe's like, I'm friends with Annie. And if somebody respects you, Chloe, that's all they kind of need to know, right? And that's part of why like word of mouth and referral has been so big for us. So connections and opportunities with kind of the right properties or people to grow our audience and tap into theirs is invaluable to us.
Great. Okay, we're putting it out there for those connections. The next question is from a previous podcast guest, so Ariel Garden of Muse, and she wants to know what you are doing to be able to help more people.
I think foundationally, the whole mission of Untoxicated is to help more people. So especially if you're prone to allergies and sensitivity, there's a database called the CAMPS database. And you can only get access to it through your dermatologist or allergist. So in order to figure out what products can I use based on my, you basically need their gatekeepers to that process. Part of Martin's whole, proposition was not just let's create a product that's free from as many allergies as possible, but let's make it accessible to the masses. We could have, chosen to sell it at a $100 price point. You can only get it through your doctor. We're really working to create a solution that is accessible. And I mean that in terms of affordability, in terms of transparency, in terms of, the information surrounding it, teaching people to fish as it relates to skin health as possible. I think for us, if we were really in this to be making money and maximizing profit and all that kind of stuff, we would have come to market in a very, very different way with what we're looking to do. So our goal is fundamentally to help as many people as possible, especially those with the kind of sensitive or inflamed or irritated skin, kind of achieve better skin health, grow their confidence, and then hopefully feel more empowered as they move ahead to take agency of their health and well-being.
I love that. Okay, and now what's a question that we will pass along to the next guest?
That's such a good question. I'm always curious when I chat with people is what are the ways in which you work to get to know your consumer?
It's a good one.
I think my job before being on the operating side was in brand strategy and innovation at work. And we started every single client project with an ethnography. And I think just given that I believe that understanding a consumer need or unmet need is so critical, I'm always, when I'm interviewing people for Untoxicated or in my past lives, I feel like it's so telling to know what is the degree to which you're kind of entrenched in or invested in, not just how people use your product, but the context of their broader lives and how your product fits into that. Because I think oftentimes that's really important, not for short-term growth, but medium to long-term longevity and creating that loyalty and that connection.
Oof, that's potent. I really, really love that. Okay. Any final kind of remarks or thoughts before we wrap this up?
Just thank you for the opportunity. Again, we're a small indie brand with a really big ambition. We're looking to take on a massive industry with a lot of some of the world's largest brands run by some of the world's largest consumer corporations. I know because I've come from one. And our success is not just, again, predicated on a better product or a better brand. It's a bit of luck and a lot of kind of opportunity and connections. And so I just want to thank you for the opportunity and the connection today to be able to tell our story, to chat with you. I'm so inspired by who you are and what you've done, and Cody and Miles as well, and the three of you. So I just want to say, however I can be a friend to the three of you and to the Decision Lab, Martin and I are 100% here for it.
Oh, thank you. That means so much.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you taking the time. Oh, we're so grateful to have you on here. This was awesome. I feel like I just learned so much. And I hope we get to do another one sometime soon, because I have so many more questions about the skincare industry and everything else that's going on. And maybe before we go,
Sure.
Where can people find you? Where do you want to send people? To your website or social media?
Sure. So right now we're available on our website for purchase, www.untoxicated.com, as well as on Amazon, so Amazon Prime. And then you can find us on Instagram and TikTok under Untoxicated Skincare.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Annie. It was so wonderful to meet you and interview you. Really, really
Perfect.
appreciate
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for listening, everyone.